Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. I'm Ronaldo Mackenzie. What will end violence? Boys and the need for positive influence. And we have an update on the Monterey massacre. That's what's coming up on the Neoliberal Round podcast. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. Question: if the fallen can perceive of anything better, what will upend violence? This episode is a break from academia to consider important issues in the news and a social problem and the personal concern I have with the state of our boys and growing up without positive and attractive influence in their lives. We are losing them to gangs. In talking about our boys, I'm talking about our boys in Philadelphia who live in vulnerable black and brown communities who have inherited the cycle of operating within the underground economy and all that comes with that. Yet, they are not far from change, for they embody the power of the yet. I share my passions and personal stories from anthropological experiences or experience while living in and learning about the life cycle of older adolescents transitioning to adulthood. In the episode, I discussed with Dante, co-producer, about how we can help, and a meeting, and several journeys, and several meetings and interviews and accountants and sorry and encounters I've had with several different individuals, young men between the ages of about 16 and probably 24. I talk more about that later on. There's a point that I missed earlier, which I need to go back to and follow up on. I was making a point earlier as it relates to the fact that, as it relates to violence in black and brown communities in the UK and US stemming from relative deprivation. And I wanted to make the point from that saying that therefore we are everywhere influenced and affected by some amount of violence from colonization to emancipation and current aggressions and invasions in the world today. So, how effective is violence a tool for change? And what is the solution to all this violence? Laws that attempt or laws that have attempted to limit gun access have been met with strong opposition from powerful gun lobbyists and their supporters in the seat of government in the US. And restrictive laws that limit access to guns in Jamaica have only created a burgeoning black market without any end to its levels of violence. In addition, video games, media, and celebrities praise the gun, which continues to condition this affinity for guns and easy retreat easy retreat into violence. So the answer must lie with love, which expresses itself in sacrificial and constructive mechanisms. So, does it not require an act of sacrifice? A character that seems to be outside of human nature given the fall. Because people cannot fathom any utopia or society of charity based on sacrifice and love while having a perfect competitive society leading to advances. Humanity cannot envision a society of equal human beings sharing their life with the other. For we have been so damaged by colonization and acts of terrorism and discrimination in every corner. Humans are suspicious of themselves and each other, and therefore lack any will or room for such progress. We pause here, and when we come back, I will get into the discussion, this anthropological experience as it relates to boys in the hood and the need of positive male influence in their lives. We'll be right back after this. Now, the same amount of violence, just so you know, the same amount of violence, and I'm going to make this point because I'm going to be talking about violence as well. So, I asked the question, if the fallen can perceive, the fallen mind can perceive of anything better, what will end violence? And I say, the same amount of violence that it takes to control people requires the same amount of force to push back against that violence. Such is the law of thermodynamics and physics. Yet, violence is the opium of the few and the privilege that continues its position. Violence from below is dismantled, taken to mean criminal, for that is what it is, an attack against a status quo. And I have to bring this up because we're going to be talking about violence, and we're going to be talking about a very important issue as it relates to our young boys and the lack of fathers and positive influence. But there is a story in the news as it relates to the Monterey killing, and not only some stabbing that happened in Georgia and something in Atlanta, and there's just rampant violence and killings we're hearing in the world. So just before I get into that story, I want to this issue of violence is important here, and we are going to get into this discussion because I asked the question. Um, we said the same amount of violence that it takes to control people requires the same amount of force to push back against that violence. Whatever the violence, type of violence, such is the law of thermodynamics and physics. That is not a rule of thumb or necessarily a general a principle everybody may subscribe to, because in today's society we may find wiggle room around that through tectonic means. Yet violence is the opium of the few and the privileged that continues its position. Again, violence is the opium of the few and the privileged that continues its position. Violence from below is dismantled, taken to mean criminal, for that is what it is, an attack against a status quo. So when is violence acceptable? When violence is used to stop oppression and discrimination or the invasion and penetration of the superpowers? But the world has become sophisticated. Violence that disrupts, leading to uprooting culture, edifices, and nature is defeatist. For what good is that for the people who must live off that at the end? Something must remain. Then we are left with MLK and his diplomatic endeavors that only ceremonially leads to gifted freedoms and his demise, or Marcus Garvey back to Africa endeavors which devolved into nepotism or the usual countervalence of the dominant force MLK was assassinated, and Marcus Garvey was jailed, deported, leading to his demise. The Achaeans, the Achaeans had looked to Achilles, the warrior godman, as the consummate hero through violence would vilify the Achaeans, the Archaeans, over the Trojans for their thievery. For those who read Iliad and are familiar with the Iliad and the stories there, or the Jews, the Jews who look to the coming of a God in Jesus, who will plunder all and restore the glory of Judah, then picked up by the Greeks in their Judeo-Christianity of a Jesus Christ as the ultimate savior, but departed from the image of war and violence to one of sacrifice and love. Yet the church had their crusades, a violent religious war against another religious group for dominance and prominence. Today, violence has intensified all over the globe so that even the US today, which represented a new free world with democracy and laws, had its US capital attacked by the same citizens who were opposing the decision of its brethren through violence, led by their leaders, elites, using strategy and the usual jargon that enticed the base, led a coup which was an American experiment by extremists. Recently, and just today, we're hearing of a 72-year-old Asian man who went into a dance studio and then and later a ballroom studio in that same area in Monterey Park. But he went to a Monterey Park dance studio in LA during the Asian Lunar New Year celebration, shot and killed 10 people and injured 10. Of course, I understand only seven is in the hospital. Three persons have been stabilized and they have, and were sent home. He later took his own life with his gun when police had engaged him. Jamaica is still considered a very violent country with one of the highest crime rates, and there's been a spike in violence in black and brown communities in the UK and the US, stemming from relative deprivation. And if you visit my website, thenailtheball.com, or you listen to previous episodes, I talk about relative deprivation, and I talk about St. Louis and this issue of relative deprivation. Therefore, we are everywhere influenced and affected by some amount of violence. I've reeled off all instances of all the acts of violence. There is no one that is free of guilt. There is nowhere where there is where there is a clean hand, a clean hand. I mean, I think the scripture says there is no one that's righteous. No, not one. We are everywhere influenced and affected by some amount of violence, from colonization to emancipation, and current aggressions and invasions in the world today, like the one going on in Russia. I mean, in Ukraine, where Russia is invading Ukraine and justifying it as a world saving mission. So, how effective is violence a tool for change? And what is the solution to all this violence? The answer must lie with love. Um, you know, I was making the point just now that uh, a lot of young men, young boys, teenage boys, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, they're not teenage, but a lot of young men in Philadelphia that I've come across, they, it seems like they don't have a lot of
positive influence and figures in their life. I mean, every time I come across several young men over the last few weeks, several, they are, their fathers are in jail. I say, or their older brothers. Like, it's as if almost all the men in their lives uh, all of them are locked up. And if they're not locked up, they're just not they're not around. They're not in their life. You know, and in retrospect, I did a podcast some time ago. What's life like living in Philadelphia? And one gentleman said, "We need a fathers movement." And I mean, there's a lot of problem with Philadelphia, but there's a lot of problems in Philadelphia. But one of the problems that we face here is crime and violence among young men, and many of our young men out is, is they lack positive influence. The only influence that makes sense to and that makes sense to them is music, rap music, and girls, bling, cannabis. I mean, and in there is no sense of God and conscience. I noticed that this is if you know I need to if you just ask people within a particular and within in this community from the various generations all the way down, you find as you go down from one generation to the next, there is the influence of the divine, and this ultimate loses value, and it devolves into this decadent neo-capitalistic attitude or mentality that Weber talks about the spirit of capitalism, the Protestant ethic, the kind of society we had in terms of. But now, I mean, and I say to you, it probably wasn't. But now it's as if this. I, I say to people, I mean, as much as people want to excoriate or probably dismiss God from everything, there is value in this in faith. It really connects us to something deeper that is beyond ourselves and within ourselves, because it helps us to appreciate the self and appreciate other selves as if those selves is part of that one self. So you treat yourself as if and the other self as one. This is deep here. But I mean, outside of that, many of them are in gangs. Many of the young men I met over the last couple of weeks, they are in gangs. And they are struggling to get their high school diplomas, or they have dropped out of school. There is no structure. They are heading home at 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning on a Monday morning when there is school. I I heard we talk about parenting, and I think there is I read a doc. I think I was watching a documentary in preparation of my course Caribbean Thought, and the documentary talks about parenting in Jamaica, talking about how parenting is defined by illegitimacy and so on and so forth, which was a wrong analysis of the island when you think about parenting. And then Edith Clark and Rex Nettleford in the book My Mother Who Fathered Me try to find linkages that explains Jamaican and Caribbean organization, social organization, or the family in terms of its African past, when as if its African past had the same kind of experience, when that was not the case. They too had a sense of family. They too had a sense of a family that Europeans thought that no, that wasn't their family. The kind of family they have was primitive, and that's the kind. But that's not true. They had the kind of family that the Europeans probably also had, because and there are also some Christian influences in the Africans, and they practice a kind of structure within the family setting that was not necessarily defined as concubinage and illegitimate. Yet there are those, but 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 some Caribbean social scientists or sociologists, such as Edith Clark, seem to be drawing that analysis, looking at making those references in terms of parenting and what happens in parenting. But parenting is a sore issue. That's why I said to you, many of our young men, they lack positive images and influences in their lives. And then when you look at TV and the video games, everything is about violence, and then of course the American dream, and then you strive to achieve that American dream at all costs. And then of course I say to you, the 6-year-old that killed the teacher, that shot. Well, I don't know. Did he kill? They shot and killed the teacher, or he shot me? I shot carried. First of all, how does a 6-year-old know how to shoot a gun? This is actual fact. This happened in right here in the U.S. I can't remember the story. I was listening to was it Power 99 or Power 98 point? You know that Power 98, that early morning show. Okay, that early morning show. I was listening to it this morning, and it was news everywhere. Power 99, whatever it is called, but it's in Philadelphia here, and they talked. I think one of the commentators talked about this 6-year-old young man who, and of course it was there's news about this, and I can't pull it up right now because I'm speaking from the top of my head about some very important issues. But 6-year-old, how he knows how to shoot a gun at 6, and he how does he know to write a note threatening his teacher? He wrote a note threatening his teacher how he's going to kill her or whatever he's going to do to her. And I heard that he barricaded, 6-year-old, barricaded the classrooms, preventing the students and the teacher from from exiting the class. Yeah, this 6-year-old boy, 6! And then he eventually got a gun and killed his teacher. Teacher, I believe. Yeah. So that this is I mean, I'm telling you, this parenting is, yeah, that's what's going on. Parenting is a sore issue. I think I did a previous episode talking about parenting. So I think I'm gonna publish an article. You'll see an article that article in the neoliberal round, in the neoliberal corporation, the neoliberal journals, or neoliberal blog. So, but I have several articles and stories that I need to publish, and actually some more news coming out. There's another news that you may have missed: the killing in that Asian town in Los Angeles. You may have missed it. I want to make a comment on that. They have found the oh, there's a press conference. Los Angeles County mass shooting in Monterey Park dance studio. 10 killed, 10 injured. The suspect, by the way, he committed suicide. a 72-year-old Asian male, 72-year-old Asian male, okay, went into went yes 72-year-old Asian went into Monterey Park dance studio, okay, shoot, and using a not a rifle, not a rifle, which is but a gun, a regular gun, pistol, which was also banned. That kind of pistol is also banned. But he, please remember, you're not supposed to be having. He never used a heavy weapon, a firearm. I mean, sorry, a AK-47. He didn't use an AK-47, but he still went into the dance studio, killing 10, injuring 10. They're trying to. No one knows of. They're not. They're still investigating them. They're still investigating. I mean, they're exploring motive now. But he killed himself. I mean, he. By the way, he escaped because he went. I believe he. They were celebrating the Chinese New Year's. The Chinese New Year's.
Yes.
And he actually left after shooting at the Monterey. That he went to up the street or down the street to another club, and they disarmed him. They took the gun away from him. Okay, but he escaped, which I don't know how a 72-year-old man can escape. Probably he practices kung fu or something. Okay, which is a I mean, I apologize. That's a discriminatory statement. That's politically incorrect. I should not have said that. I was trying to be funny here, but probably that might be a below the belt joke. So I take that back. That deserves the kind of slap that the slap that what's his name? Who gave it the slap? Will Smith slapped who did he slap? Chris Rock. Because he said an inappropriate joke, and he was using his wife, and I may have done so. So probably I deserve a slap right here for using that. But that's more news coming out today. 72-year-old now we talk about killings. I mean, there's been so much killings in the U.S. lately, mass killings. I mean, it's just every month there is mass killing, or is this, or in black and brown neighborhoods there is killings. There is this just high amount. There's just violence everywhere. Of course, I am teaching Caribbean thought, and I talk about violence and solutions to violence, and I ask about violence in the class, and I actually talk about violence in a very unique way that I will discuss it later on. The issue of violence and how we can deal with the problem of violence, all type of violence, and of course, people would think that we will never be able to deal with violence, and I say, well, there's good violence and there's bad violence. Okay, the violence where if the victimized need to remove the hand of the oppressor. But then there are those who feel as though they're victimized and they're not being victimized and use violence as a way. So this is quite interesting. And so I end up by saying, you know what, we just need love. The kind of love that Jesus demonstrated. Jesus, being God, according to Christianity, sacrificed himself, his deity, which was an act of love. An act of love requires sacrifice. Are we willing to sacrifice? That's the thing. It is as if it is outside of human nature. But can I tell you, it is within human nature. Sacrifice is within. But guess what? We are so conditioned by colonization to think in a particular way. To think as though, we will never be able to achieve utopian society. We will never be able to love in the way that you want us to love, unconditionally. We'll never be able to love and provide. Okay, but guess what? That is the kind of mind that is facilitated within a society that has conditioned it to think in those ways. Okay? When you look throughout history of time, we talk about the fall of man. And so man is now trying to get back to that. But even within religions of the world, there is this kind of privilege. We are unwilling to sacrifice and to give up anything or to budge in order to include and to involve the other. When that is the ultimate sacrifice. That is the ultimate That is the ultimate of all things. That is the miracle. That's what God wants of all of humanity. That is the essence of all things. And when I said, what is the ultimate of all things? That we become one with reality in all of it. I mean, to become one is a recognition of the self in terms of the other, which involves the golden rule: do unto others as much as you want others to do unto you. But that sense is gone. People don't listen to deep esoteric things of charity. Those things are boring. They watch Housewives of LA or whatever it's called. That no, that promotes violence and dysfunction. And then you look in homes and you look even in my own life and in my own family, there's some kind of reality TV living out itself.
It's amusing seeing other people's lives and how they are living it. You know, it makes you think like, okay, well, you know, on certain circumstances, you know, like would I do that or how can I put this or ooh like that's a nice outfit or this and that, you know, or like conversation wise, like you can still grasp, you know, some things from it.
Yes, this is.
I think.
But you know, I my heart really went. I mean, you know, that young man that I met today, earlier today, on my course of business, working, I had a powerful conversation. It was a group of them, and then one young man remained in the vehicle, and I spoke with him as I traveled, and it was just powerful. He's Jamaican, powerful, first generation, but he lacks. And you know what? And I said, I want to take this young man under my wing. I want to, young, he's 18. But I just felt we need more mentors. They used to have a mentorship program, a big brother, big sister program, but I don't know what but still there is still a deep need for that. But you know what? People are busy trying to make ends meet. They cannot be the big brother or the big sister in their neighborhood. But when we need, that's what many of our young men need: positive role models to invest in their lives, to encourage them, to motivate them, to provide advice when their own fathers aren't around. Not to take advantage, but to really to, if we have an essence of things and where we want in life, you know what, it's then there is this purity and that one act or move from or operate in, which many people may adjudicate as something else because of the selfishness that people in their own lives that they project onto others as a way of, I don't know, Sigmund Freud. You can read Sigmund Freud, but he talks about defense mechanisms and so on and so forth. But these young men, they need positive role models in their lives. You know, I asked him, what is it that you want to do? He said he wanted to be an engineer. I said, you have to study. That's a lot of math, a lot of physics. And he's like, wow, really? He said, okay, wow. I said, yep, you have to apply yourself to those things. So you see, it begins with that kind. What you want to do, and then let them understand what it takes. People never probably really sit down and talk to them about what it's going to take. Are you up to that? Is that something that you have? And then also explore what other skills do you have. Talk about what's going on in society. I said social media, the 21st century is about social media, digital technology. What about developing skills like that, and so on and so forth? Do you have somebody who can teach and help you? And then I spoke with him about resource-based sentencing and supervision. I said, "Where's your dad? His dad is in jail." I said, "Okay, probably he's locked up for life." I said, "Fine, but do you know that they are changing the rules now, sentencing rules? So now they are people are now." And I did interview the Honorable Stephanie M. Sawyer, and I was at the launch at the Sentencing Foundation, their web launch, and I spoke with several judges and professionals in the field and so on, and for people who are serving lifetime parole, people who are serving and you can check the previous episodes on the podcast, my YouTube feed, so on and so forth. I need to write some articles and publish in the Neoliberal, but I said to him that they are now changing the rules. Said now maybe your father could have a chance of coming out if, because now they're changing the sentencing rules, and now they're talking about lifetime parole. Instead of spending all that time in jail, in prison on life, you spend the rest of that you can, if based on your behavior and so on and so forth, then and their resource they can he can maybe released and he can be placed on lifetime parole like what they're doing now, and providing them with resource-based sentencing and supervision, providing them with resources and jobs and opportunities and so on and so forth. And many of these men, and I met several parolees, people serving lifetime parole. I've met several of them. I've worked with some of them. I've met them. I've spoken with them, interviewed them, rubbed shoulders. Part of my, as I journey and explore and study life and come to understand things. And I said, probably that's something you could consider. And I said, we'll talk about this some more, because probably I could point you in that direction. Maybe that's something you could talk to. The next time you talk to your dad, you could talk to him about it. But this is, and I brought this story to show this is what some of the things that we can do as men in our community with our young boys. They want somebody to talk to, and I gave him the podcast. You might hear me talking about him right now. The podcast. Give him a copy of the and I guess what, I'm not going to judge him. I don't care what he does with his life and how he's doing it. I want to provide an example of something else. And then as he goes on through his life, as he grows, then he can say, you know what? Let me make up my mind about whether or not I want to continue this way or go the other way. And that's sometimes that's the problem in terms of how we approach young people, in terms of we try to change them. We judge them. But no, we what we do is we try to provide another example. So that, and I never, not once did I say, and I'm not going to share anything else about him, but I never said anything about him. Not once did I chide him. I just talked about what I did and provided some advice and resources and we connect and said, and this is how we can connect with each other and so on. And he said it was powerful, and then we got to keep the link. I said yes, definitely. He's a first generation Jamaican, and he American, sorry, first generation American in his family. He's a first generation American. There's that where you know what, I don't believe in labeling.
Explain it.
I don't believe in labeling, but there is this idea of this first generation. Who is the first generation American? When we talk about first generation American, or first generation Jamaican. In other words, he's a first generation Jamaican. Means he's the first born in he was born here, but his parents are from Jamaica. But then his child will become a second generation Jamaican. Living in the U.S. or American of Jamaican descent in that sense. We're talking about lines of connection, how they're connected from generation to generation. So he will be the first. Will be the first generation, the first line. Okay, so it means that both his parents are originally from Jamaica, and okay, but he was born here. So then he's the first generation.
In his family.
Yes. In his line, yeah, in that sense, okay. But this is but I think this is what we need in society. Positive people in empowering these young men. They need it.
So from your line, who was the first generation?
I am not a first anything.
No, I'm saying from your family. Who came here first? Who's your father, right? Nate?
No, there is no first generation here. I mean,
I
no.
don't know.
The first generation. I don't have a first generation. I'm not first generation. I'm like his parents. I came here from Jamaica. So if I have a child, then my child will be first generation, first of my line, and to be a okay in terms of so it that only means it's talk
I had
that
this
speaks to
something,
your
but I understand.
well that speaks to your connection how the length of your connection is like first cousins, second cousins, talking about your in terms of the your proximity, the level, the strength of your connection to something. Say for example, we are brothers, and then you, and then I have cousins. So in terms of in relation to our grandfather, okay, then it will be if I share if we are both brothers, then my child will our children will call each other cousins. It speaks to proximity, and you have second cousins and third cousins, or first. Okay, you have mother, grandmother. It speaks to proximity, the line of connection. So the first generation, second generation also speaks to how the length and the strength of your connection, your line to the original. Okay, so I would be the original, but I don't. My parents were born in Jamaica, so okay. So that's I don't know if I'm explaining it. This is quite an interesting concept, which I probably should include in my Caribbean thought class. There's also the issue of there's one more there's one other issue happening um, in terms of Biden. The tax season has begun, and I believe that as of today, Americans can officially start filing their individual income taxes, their income tax returns for 2022. As of today, okay, as of today, Americans can now start filing their taxes. That's the first thing. And just so you know, I understand from WHYY earlier this morning, I was watching and reading some newspapers and so on and so forth, several articles and commentators I said, and from tax experts. I hope to have John. I actually reached out to John Casher because I want to talk to him about the tax, because he's the president of AI Tax. I want to talk with him about the tax season and this news that filers are now going to get less on their tax returns because of COVID, the COVID pandemic. That because the federal government, the government had to use a lot of federal money or tax money to spend on COVID and vaccinations and so on and so forth. Um, they will see some kind of reduction in their tax. People will see reductions in their tax returns. Um, but that's what I'm hearing. But we can follow up on that. This is the Neil the Go Around podcast. We are talking about just some general themes and news, but more so, I wanted to lift up this experience I had with some young men today, which is quite anthropological. And I was studying them, and I noticed they're this new thing now. This the fashion, this black pants and black hoodie and black ski mask and black covering. I mean, there is this black, this suspicious, but it's the thing now. This
Incognito.
being the incognito look is the thing now. that is the thing. Everybody wants to look like that's the fashion now. That's actually how the boys are looking now. Just so you know that the black sweats and the black hoodie and the black ski mask, and you only see their eyes. That's what's up with that? So it's yeah, and they love it. They are enjoying. They never had a problem with the mandate. That's what I'm talking about. It's all about perspective. What they never allowed the mandate to disrupt their lives. Okay, they never allowed to control them. They said, okay, we're gonna show you how we are gonna control you. You think you're controlling us. So they took the mandate and turned it into fashion. Sorry, the mandate to wear masks. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you think you're going to control us with mandates? So what they do, they turn it around and turn the thing. That's the judo technique of argumentation. It's a technique I learned while reading this book by James evangelism explosion, the church in Florida. I studied evangelism explosion and so on, and they talk about the judo technique of turning an argument on its head with which that argument from evangelism explosion talks about this how one experiences salvation through Calvinism, was developed through a philosophical method of arguing, of rhetoric and debating. And philosophy, it's the judo technique, turning the thing on its head, allowing the force of something to pull you down, okay? And when the weight of it, when you have reached a particular pressure point, then you release, and that thing crumbles on its head. So that's probably that's what's happening. Quite interesting. This is the Neoliberal Podcast. We'll be right back. That's going to be part of a lecture that I will give on Friday. And if I cannot continue with this particular lecture presentation, we'll go on to the following week. It promises to be deep. This is the Neoliberal Podcast, brought to you by the Neoliberal Corporation. Visit us at www.theneoliberal.com. And you can also support us by going to anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support. You can visit me on ResearchGate or on academia.edu by going to Ronaldo McKenzie or Ronaldo C. McKenzie. Follow us on Twitter at the Neoliberal Co. or Ronaldo McKenzie, and also on LinkedIn. And we are also we are everywhere on Facebook, Reddit, so on and so forth. Please support us and follow us. Subscribe to all our feeds and let us know how we're doing. Share all our stuff with your friends, and please invest in us. Walk with it.